Fantastic. Well, we're a couple minutes after the hour, so we will go ahead and get started. Again, as I mentioned, feel free to pop your name and where you are joining us from into the chat. So good afternoon and good evening for everyone who is here tonight. Welcome to Together Women Rise's May webinar. As Wendy mentioned a bit earlier, my name is Rachel Peterson. I'm going to be moderating our webinar this evening, and I am currently a chapter leader for a chapter out of Hudson, Ohio. I've been with Rise for nearly 10 years now, actually. And I'm also a former volunteer regional leader for the Central region. So before we get fully into things, a couple quick housekeeping items. Please do mute yourself if you're not already automatically muted when you join. You can do that by hitting the little microphone that's going to be in the lower left-hand corner of your Zoom screen. And once the red line goes through that, you are set to go and muted. And you also have a couple of options when it comes to viewing this webinar. There's a little view icon that's in the upper right-hand corner of your Zoom screen, and you have the option to view in speaker view or in gallery view. And speaker will give you the great big screen of whoever is talking, so it would be my lovely face right now. And gallery view will allow you to see everybody who is joining us. And you know, I know we've got likely some new folks who are joining us tonight. So again, by all means, introduce yourself in the chat. And if this is your first time experiencing an event with Together Women Rise, I can give you a brief overview of the organization, what we're all about. So Together Women Rise is this powerful community of women and allies, and we are dedicated to achieving global gender equality. We have hundreds of local chapters across the US, as I'm sure you've already seen in the chat, where members learn about gender equality issues and give grants to organizations that empower women and girls in low-income countries. And we do all of that while building community and forging meaningful connections, both with each other, but also with the women and girls that we serve around the world. And if you want to know more, if this is your first interaction with us, please check out togetherwomenrise.org for more information and for ways that you can get involved. So with those things said and done, I'm very excited to introduce our featured grantee, Yamba, Malawi. So each month, Together Women Rise features a project that addresses one of the many challenges faced by women and girls in low-income countries around the world. And we award these projects a featured grant of between $35,000 to $50,000. And together, through this national webinar and also at chapters all across the US, we learn about the country, the challenges, and how the project that we're working with will help women and girls in the fight for global gender equality. So this month, we're partnered with Yamba Malawi to empower women, including many young mothers, to break the cycle of poverty for themselves and for their children through holistic, child-focused poverty graduation programs. And before we introduce Kim to tell us a little bit more about the work of Yamba Malawi, we are going to play a short video about the program. So Wendy, I will turn it to you for the video.
Together Women Rise's grant to Yamba Malawi will enable young mothers in Mangochi, Malawi to enroll in Yamba's child-focused poverty graduation program. Malawi, located in the southern eastern part of Africa, is the fourth poorest country in the world. For families in extreme poverty, there are many challenges, including access to healthcare, education, nutritious food, and proper shelter. This can also lead to child marriages. In Mangochi, child marriages have more than tripled since the start of COVID-19.
In Mangochi, we have these early marriages because parents think that when they send their child to get married, it's a solution for them to relieve themselves of the responsibility of taking care of children, because in Mangochi, fertility rate is high. And one way of reducing their responsibility, they get their girls in marriages with older men or young men.
Unlike these other young mothers, domestic violence, torture, and other unbearable circumstances forced Frida Jeffley, a 22-year-old young mother from Nenula village, traditional authority in Tonda in Mangochi district, into an early marriage.
Tawi mine ndinali mwana ndili pa skulu, ndimatha kupita ku skulu. Ndipo ku skulu ko lingaliro langa limene ndimapita ku skulu, ndimafuna kuti ndiphunzire mpaka nakumaliza. Ndipo ndikamaliza ndidzapeze ntchito yomagwira ntchito ya doctor boma la Mangochi. Koma zinandikanika chifukwa cha mavuto amene anandikanikisa kuti ndifike pamalo pamene ndimafuna ine chifukwa cha makolo anga amandipanga nkhanza, ndipo ndimali ndikamachoka ku school ndikafika pano pa khomo chakudya chilichonse sindimachipeza.
But there is good news. Yamba Malawi's child-focused poverty graduation program is working well. We are working to end extreme poverty for children and building sustainable change for their communities. Yamba Malawi utilizes 3 pillars. 1. Childhood well-being. 2. Building sustainable businesses. And 3. Financial literacy. We meet families' immediate needs and launch businesses for lasting change in their communities.
Mangochi district is one of the districts here in Malawi which is rated highly in terms of poverty levels. Looking at the general population, poverty level is at 63.5%, which translates into more vulnerable households that need support. In addition to that, according to 2018 Malawi government and UNICEF report, it indicates that 66.3% of the children in Mangochi, they live in child poverty. So due to that, as an organization, we thought that it would be very critical for the child-focused poverty graduation program to be implemented in Mangochi to deal with issues in terms of nutritional issues, water and sanitation issues, health issues, education issues, but also child protection issues.
Yamba Malawi opted to target young mothers for this intervention, mainly because caregivers of children under age 5 in many households in rural areas are young mothers who have dropped out of school and lack financial or emotional support. Naturally, any intervention aimed at improving the well-being of young children will need to account for the circumstances of the mother.
Kubwera bunge la Yamba Malawi linali wosangalala kwambiri. Chifukwa kusangalala kwa ine kunali kuonera kuti khumbo langa ndi malingaliro anga ali wotheka, chifukwa ndi ndalama zimene akuti azitithandiza pakatha miyezi 6 atipasanso ndalama zoti tipangire business yomwe ndingamazapange ine, monga ngati yoda somba kuchokera ku nyanja ndikumapita naye misika ikuluikulu ku Chat Valley, kuchilipa, kupengapenga. Ndipo mu business mwa ine momwemo ndizapezamo ma interest okayika ku banki, ndipo ku bankiko ndizikasunga pang'ono ndikumapanga business yanga ku banki, so ndikumakasunga, ndikumatenga ndalama zija ndikumapanga program yogula malo komanso yomangisapo nyumba ndikugulirapo ziweto zosiyanasiyana kuchokera mu bunge la Yamba Malawi.
And that leads me to our guest speaker this evening, who I am so thrilled to introduce to you. We have Mccall joining us, who is Yamba Malawi's managing director. And prior to joining Yamba Malawi, Kim spent nearly 25 years leading nonprofits to scale impact, grow revenue, and build equity and develop talent, with previous leadership roles at child-focused nonprofits, including Kesem, Playworks, and the Happy Hearts Fund. Kim currently serves as an adjunct faculty member at Columbia University, as an appointed city official for New York City Manhattan Community Board 5, and as an advisor to the Juice Box Project, which she co-founded to empower intergenerational economic mobility through youth entrepreneurship. She received her Master's of Public Policy degree from Georgetown University, and if that was not enough, is also a PhD student in global leadership and change at Pepperdine University. So it is my joy, Kim, to welcome you here to our webinar tonight, and please take it away.
Ooh, what an introduction. I wish I could just have you follow me around everywhere, Rachel, every time I walked into a room.
I'll hype you up.
I love it. I love it. Well, I am just so thrilled and honored to be here with all of you tonight, and watching that video every time I see the impact that we're able to make because of the generosity of this organization right here in this incredible Zoom room. I get the chills. It just gets me so excited to be with this dream team tonight. I don't think I ever Oh, now that the screen share is working. Perfect. So I put together just a couple of slides. I'm sure that you'd love to look at my beautiful face on the big screen, but you could still see me hopefully on the side over there. So I thought during our time together, I would, of course, thank you profusely for your incredible support and tell you more about how we will be leveraging that. I want to dive in just a tad bit more about the actual work that we do. I also have some fantastic stories to share. I actually had the opportunity to visit Malawi a couple of weeks ago, and I spent time with Frida, who was the participant featured in the video that we just had the opportunity to watch. And then I'll spend some time answering some questions. So hopefully that sounds good to everyone. And if at any time it gets wonky and you're seeing like my full cluttered screen, just give me a shout out, because that might be very stressful for everyone to see how many tabs I have open. I am one of those people. So I thought I'd spend just a minute talking about why focus on child poverty, and specifically children under age 5, which obviously your organization also has a focus and affinity for supporting that group. So we know that the first few years of life are times of both great opportunity and great risk for children, because their brains and bodies are developing more quickly than at any other time of life. But in a worst case scenario, inadequate care, nutrition, access, housing, shelter, education, all of these things can result in stunting. So technically, stunting is defined as extremely low height for age, and it's irreversible. And studies have shown that stunted kids are more likely to become sick, perform less well in school, earn less when they're adults, and suffer from chronic diseases later in life. So this is often an outcome of extreme poverty. And sadly, in Malawi, a staggering 41% of kids are stunted by age 5 due to under and malnourishment. So why Malawi? As if that wasn't enough, globally, extreme poverty is really concentrated, as we know, in sub-Saharan Africa, and Malawi, as mentioned in the video. And I know you have context because you've also had previous grantees from the area, is the 4th poorest country in Africa and in the world. The GDP per capita in Malawi is only $637 per year. 80% of the population live in rural areas and depend on rain-fed subsistence farming to have enough food. 70% of the population live in extreme poverty, which is defined as less than $2 per day. And in fact, in Mangochi, families are living on 68 cents a day. So it's extremely common for families to not have enough food for several months during the lean season each year. And of course, I know COVID is top of mind. What have been the impacts there? It's absolutely exacerbated vulnerabilities and needs across Malawi, especially for children. How that's kind of manifested in Malawi is that, all schools in the country were shut down for several months, as we experienced here in the US. Health services were interrupted and overloaded. Many households saw negative economic impacts caused directly or indirectly by the national shutdowns and border closures. And because of this, the impacts on children, especially related to like reduced immunizations and healthcare, lost schooling and learning, and particularly relevant for our focus on young mothers in the Mangochi project that we are launching together, there was a really sharp increase in teen pregnancies and marriages, which many saw as a result of prolonged school closures. So, however, along with great need is also great opportunity to have impact. And I'm sure you're likely somewhat familiar, of course, given your previous work in the country, that Malawi has a pretty stable and democratic government, an active civil society, a very young population, and an existing political commitment to end child poverty. So hence why we choose to focus on Malawi. So why a child-focused poverty graduation model? Poverty graduation in general is a pretty well-known model. It aims to provide a super holistic package of all the support needed to enable an ultra-poor family to graduate from extreme poverty, typically over a period of 2 to 3 years. The package includes things like intensive training and coaching in life skills, temporary income support, money to start a business, as we heard mentioned by Frida, and connection to other financial services. However, globally, children are more than twice as likely to live in extreme poverty than adults. Yet, while poverty graduation models have been proven to end extreme poverty around the world, only about a third of them include a focus on children. And so we're really working to change that. So how our model is a bit different is that it's based on 3 pillars: childhood well-being, sustainable business, and financial inclusion. And what really attracted me to the work of Yamba Malawi, as mentioned, or some of you might have heard, I've been on the team for about 4.5 months, so still fairly new to this work. But I was so inspired by the very comprehensive and holistic approach to supporting kids and creating better futures for them in this manner. So while our ultimate goal is to improve children's lives, we recognize that poverty is the common driver of most challenges they face, and we must break that cycle in order to have lasting impact. So our program participants are the caregivers of children under the age of 5. In the case of the Mangochi work that we will be doing, we're specifically focusing on young mothers, young being defined as under 25. And in every program location, we also partner with like existing community organizations that serve children, so that we're really creating support and structure beyond just our household direct programming. Our program lasts for 3 years and is implemented in 3 phases. We like the rule of 3s. In the first phase is when participants receive the 12 months of cash transfers. And those are to provide immediate consumption support for food, clothing, school fees, healthcare, to really help make ends meet that were currently being overlooked. And so we work on the immediate needs as well as at the same time training for the long term. So that looks like participating in intensive weekly training sessions that cover all the topics from entrepreneurship to nutrition for kids to financial literacy. And our participants receive home visits by field staff every 2 weeks for one-to-one coaching. So then in the second phase, the participants get the transfer of the startup capital to launch their business. They're really coached on that success. Children's outcomes are continued to be monitored. And in the third phase, what's really exciting is that we are building entrepreneurs. So we are encouraging our participants to be resilient in their approach to business and to start not just one business, but multiple. So anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 businesses, so that if there is a shock to the economy or to the climate, that they have that resilience and that savings. So we work with them on growing their and diversifying their business income and really saving and budgeting. So it's such a fantastic program in that respect. We also work on training teachers and caregivers in the community and help them launch a community level business that funds improvements in schools and community services. And notably, we've developed our own curricula for all of this that's been recognized by the government of Malawi as being the only that's really based on Indigenous knowledge around early childhood development. And so what that means is like, we use local songs and games and positive cultural parenting practices. So a little about how we think about impact, and you'll be hearing a lot about this during the term of our work together. So we're so excited to be sharing that as we roll out our second cohort in Mangochi with you. We measure based on graduation criteria that focus on 7 key areas of children's needs, being nutrition, which we look at as food security, and importantly, dietary diversity, which is something that's often overlooked. But I believe that from what I've heard about your funding interests, you're all probably very well versed in. And I think there might be other speakers tonight that might be covering some of this as well. Healthcare, immunizations, the use of treated bed nets, because of course, malaria is also a huge concern in Malawi. Education, how we measure that is enrollment and attendance in pre-primary and primary schools. Housing, safe housing and roofing in particular. Water, if there's access to safe drinking water. Sanitation, good hygiene practices have been something that we've really dug in on during COVID, and the wash basics. And then social protection, which essentially is prevention of abuse and exploitation. And then we also, of course, measure business and financial successes and gains, like household income, income diversification, and savings rates, financial services. And something else that that we work with are village savings and loan groups, which happy to dig in on that more if you're curious, but involvement and participation in those groups as well. So what does all of this mean, and what kind of results have we seen so far? So from our pilot program, we've seen increases of 6 times more kids eating 3 meals a day. And when you think about those stunting figures that I mentioned very early on, this is like a tremendous gain for kids. We're seeing 2 times more students going to school regularly. Household income is increasing on average 5 times, and 11 times more families are having savings. So we are so excited to realize those types of impacts and outcomes in Mangochi. So this is, I feel like drum roll is in order, the area where we're working together, which you saw in the video, of course. This is the project being funded by Together Women Rise. We will enroll 300 women-led households, as we saw in the video. And Mangochi was selected for this project in particular because it's a district, as you've heard, where challenges to women and girls are particularly severe, with among Malawi's highest rates of gender-based violence, child marriage, teen pregnancy, and child poverty. So the community where our program will launch together is called Traditional Authority Wamanyambi. And as we speak, our team is actually currently out in the field conducting a census from house to house within the community as the first step in enrolling our cohort. And we'll be launching by the end of this month. So this is just like such exciting news that we're able to spend this time together tonight. So I also wanted to share just a little bit about my recent trip and how lucky I was that I had the opportunity to hang out with Frida and her 2 adorable kids. As mentioned in the video, Frida is a 22-year-old single mom. Her husband unfortunately left for work in South Africa and never came back. And as she expressed in her interview, she told me about the hope that she felt the first time she heard about Yamba Malawi. And I'm happy to share, because of course the video was filmed a couple of months ago before she'd started in the program, that just 2 months in, when I met her, she had already started using some of her consumption support to start her first small business, which was reselling tomatoes. So she had put together this incredible farm stand, which was, straight out of the countryside, something that we would see, out, visiting upstate, I would say, here in New York City. And she confided in me that for the first time in her life, she's able to provide 3 meals a day for her kids. And you heard her talk about her dreams of saving to build a bigger house for them. And I mean, she is talking about like an entire business empire. So her next business is the fishmongering. So she'll be purchasing fish from the nearby lake and reselling that in the village. She's starting small livestock. She's starting her own kitchen garden, which she'll sell extra produce from as well. So she is an entrepreneur at her soul. And I think my favorite part of my time with Frida was when I asked her, as I was wrapping up, what her favorite part of being a mom was. And she said she loves when her kids call her mom, because now she finally feels deserving of that special title. And I just thought that was such a profound revelation, and to think that all of you are helping that be true for so many young mothers, especially as we lead up to Mother's Day during our time together. So I wanted to say Zikomo, that means thank you in Chichewa. And just so grateful to be doing this work with you. Yamba Malawi has developed a solution that's proven to break the cycle of poverty for kids and families. And your support will let us empower significantly more of them to realize better, brighter futures. And so together, I know that we can end childhood poverty, and we just feel so lucky and so grateful to be on this journey with you. So thank you.
Thank you, Kim. We do have some questions that are coming in the chat, so I'll read them out for you and encourage anyone else to put their questions in the chat. The first one was about timing. When exactly is the rollout of the part of your work that we will be funding?
Sure. So it's actually kicking off this month, which is so exciting. And how the program works is that in the very first month, all of our participants, we give them a cell phone and they get direct mobile cash transfers of that consumption support. So that starts immediately because we recognize families are struggling, kids are starving, and we want to meet those needs while we're helping to create sustainability with the training and the launching of businesses and things of that nature. So what's unique about our program is that we focus on the immediate, and we also focus on the long term in order to build that sustainability. And along the way, we also do a lot of childhood well-being training. And that looks like, as I was mentioning, like dietary diversity, understanding more about what proper nutrition looks like for your kids, sanitation and wash practices, making sure that there are separate facilities for this to happen, working on, creating a kitchen garden and using safe drinking water to water that. So there's all sorts of different things that we work with caregivers and that we'll work with young moms on. And during the first 6 months, they're also getting lots of business training. They start working on a business plan, and we have one-to-one coaching in order to support that. What we do in advance of that is a feasibility study. So we go out into the community, we listen, we learn, we see what the possibilities are, what the competition might be, what the supply and demand looks like, so that we can put together like a lot of different opportunities and selections, and then work with participants to decide which is most interesting and appealing for them. And so those are some of the initial steps. And then after the business plan is put together and a budget developed is when we invest $125 in startup capital. So that all kind of takes place over the first 12 months. And then we support in 2 additional years with a lot of one-to-one coaching. So that's
awesome.
all, yeah.
It's exciting. That's getting started right away.
It's so exciting.
I think you mentioned that that you work with other organizations to try and have more of a collective impact in the area. Tell us a little bit more about that, and what are the focus of some of those organizations you work with?
Yeah, sure. So Malawi has a interesting structure in that it does have what I would call kind of like a preschool system within villages. So they're called CBCCs, community-based child care centers. And we work with these centers in order to train the caregivers in our early childhood development curriculum, which has been approved by the government of Malawi. So we certify them. We also help them to launch their own businesses. So I actually had the chance to visit one of our preschools in a different region that's a little further along in the program. And they were telling me stories about how previously they'd only been able to feed the students once a week. However, they were able to launch a business, and now they were purchasing maize or corn products in bulk and then reselling at smaller village markets. And they were making enough profit to feed the kids every single day. So it's things like that, and then they'll save. In Mangochi in particular, there aren't a lot of structures. So I know some of the preschools and other organizations are looking to create businesses and savings in order to build structures for learning and things of that nature. So right now they're just like learning under, you know, grass roofs and such. So we've got the preschools, and then there's also what they call community-based organization. But in the sense of Malawi, I mean, many of us would just think of that as like a general nonprofit. However, in Malawi, it's specifically tied to children as well. So it's another organization within each village that is tasked with supporting all of these services. So we also work with them. They're included in all of our trainings, and we help them launch a business too in order to sustain some of their elevated investment in kids. So, and then hopefully, you know, all of these structures together will be able to sustain the break in the cycle of poverty in future years. So
Great. Here's an interesting question. With many women starting various businesses, is there any competition among them? And is there any sort of disconnect with the collective nature of the culture of the participants, that, you know, that it's a commercial model and many of them starting businesses?
Yeah. These are great questions. Oh my gosh, I love it. So, no, because it's interesting because having just kind of come on board myself, I've had a lot of these same questions. So something that's, I think, unique to our program is that we really, and you heard from my background as well, that I have a robust interest in this, is that we really foster and nurture an entrepreneurial mindset, because our participants really need to be resilient in the face of a lot of economic shocks that happen within developing countries. So whether it's climate disasters, whether it's war, whether it's disease, whatever that might look like. And so we spend a lot of time and energy helping to foster and nurture that, which I think is an interesting component and part of like why we don't let our participants start just one business. We work with them to start multiple businesses in order to build out a full portfolio. Now, as far as competition, it's interesting you say that, because we conduct a feasibility study, first of all, in order to identify if there is too much competition for a specific type of business, that it would fail and not be successful because like there's not that much demand, or the demand's already being met. So we do coach and guide in that respect. However, our program is not prescriptive. It's very indigenously informed. So I want that to be clear. But what we've seen happen is that communities want to support and lift one another up. And one of the things that we work to do is to start a village savings and loan. So I'm not sure, this is like, it's a pretty common framework for poverty graduation. However, essentially it's all of the participants pooling their money together, and you get shares in a, quote unquote savings and loan in a bank. And then people can take out loans against the bank. And then at the end of, a certain amount of time, whether it's 6 months or a year, all of the loans must be paid back, and they cash out all of the shares. You make a little bit of money, and then they do it again. And so I had the opportunity to visit we call them VSL, a VSL meeting, and there were 40 participants, and people were like lining up to get involved. And to hear the stories of, women that were now kind of making this passive income, and like how kind of empowering that was. And then others who were able to take out a bigger loan than, they would have previously had access to in order to launch. Someone told me about a donut shop that they had launched. I was like, oh, it's so hip. And the profits from the donut shop, she was able to buy her kids clothes, pay their school fees, feed them 3 meals a day for the first time. We've also seen and we're leaning in more on this, and I think we'll start to develop it and actually be doing a bit of work in Mangochi around farming cooperatives. So we also work with a lot of our small farmers to, kind of pool their supply in order to negotiate better rates at market. And so we're starting to navigate a little more of that as well. But it's in their best interest then to work together. So
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about the literacy rate or the average education level of the women you're working with in Mangochi?
Sure, sure. And that's such a great question. I might need to pull some new numbers on that as we get our new cohort of women together. However, you know, most, because of the young kind of child marriage and the young motherhood ages, it's, you know, unlikely that it's more than 6 years of schooling, I would say. So, but I can definitely get more context on that. That is a really great question.
Now, what about, were there many children that were all orphaned in the area due to COVID?
Yes, so we have seen that, and because of that, we are working with a lot of female caregivers that have taken kids in and are now, so they are being included in our program as well. And something else that we do in our program is that each participant can also have a proxy participate in all of the trainings, so that, you know, they have a support system and network in order to support the care as well. But we have seen quite a bit of that, unfortunately.
It is unfortunate. Tell us a little bit about the nutrition aspect. What foods are you introducing to them to have a diversity of diet, and are they receptive to these foods? And you know, just talk a little bit more about that. And someone was wondering, how does the donut shop fit in with that good nutrition?
Right. It's a great point. So, you know, it's really interesting.
Our members will keep you on your toes.
I know. I was just fascinated. I was like, am I in Brooklyn? This is great. Amazing. So to talk about nutrition, though, I mean, it's interesting because there is just kind of a lack of knowledge around what proper nutrition looks like. And so there's a bit of a misunderstanding that if you're eating 3 meals a day of maize, that would be enough food. But we know that is resulting in malnourishment. So so we've had to do a lot of kind of, you know, community conversations in order to build that understanding. And another crop that is very friendly to Malawi is soybean. So we're introducing a lot of soy protein into the maize that's already being served. And that's, you know, people are really enjoying that. So one other thing we do is that we encourage each of our families to start what we call a kitchen garden. So a small space on your property where you're growing your own vegetables. And, you know, this is also to prepare for like economic shock, but it's for your own consumption and for, again, diversifying the types of food that you're able to feed your children. So a lot of that is, you know, and I have to say in Mangochi, the traditional authorities where we're working are untouched. Like there are no organizations currently working there. I was the first international visitor that Frida had ever met. So this is, you know, profound work, and a lot of it is knowledge building in the sense that like there was, you know, simply no one knew about what nutrition should look like. We saw the same thing with sanitation practices as far as like washing hands, you know, just not knowing that that was something that was important in order to stay healthy. So a lot of that, again, is, you know, reducing stigma, having community conversations. Of course, our programs are very locally led. And so that's such a huge component of how we're able to transform communities.
So there are several other questions in the chat. I'm going to ask one more, and then if you don't mind going into the chat yourself while we continue with the program. There's a few fairly simple questions I think you can answer quickly, but if you could just give us some sort of scope of how much of an impact our project will have. How large is the community? and how many will the project income? How many would we be working with this project?
Sure, sure. So in our work together, we will work with 300 households. So that's 300 young moms plus their proxies. On average, you know, each family, let's say, has roughly 2 to 3 children. So building that out, and then, you know, the ripple effect within a community is that thousands of kids are impacted. So, you know, I would say that it will be around 10,000 that we're able to reach because of the support.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, as I say, there are, you know, if you want to go back and answer a few of these other questions just in the chat as we move along, I'm going to turn it back to Rachel to go to the next part.
Thank you so
Thanks
much
again for having me.
Thank you.
And thanks for your support.
It is an absolute pleasure to have you, and we are so excited to be a part of the next stage of the journey. So thank you for joining us tonight. And as Wendy mentioned, you know, if folks have other questions, feel free to drop in the chat, and Kim, as you're able to answer them, please do so. And so the Yamba Malawi project that we've just learned about, as well as last month's project, Second Mile Haiti, both focus, at least in part, on the importance of good nutrition to improve the long-term health and economic well-being of women, children, and families living in extreme poverty. And as we've just heard, it's very much a holistic undertaking. It's not just about one aspect or looking at a single part of the cycle in order to truly reach the point of food sustainability and security. And so countries like Malawi and Haiti are not alone in the consequences of malnutrition. Globally, nearly 150 million children under 5 were affected by stunting, which Kim told us a little bit about, in 2020, and over 45 million were affected by wasting. And those are both severe forms of malnutrition. And so that leads us into the other guests that we have speaking with us tonight. We have invited the co-chairs of our advocacy group with Results to discuss the broader issue of global malnutrition, as well as the efforts that are underway to ensure that the US is making global nutrition programs a funding priority. So to that end, please welcome Dr. Leslie Heilig, a longtime RISE member and volunteer and a retired pediatrician, and Ken Patterson, the Director of Grassroots Impact with the organization Results. So Leslie and Ken, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks so much, Rachel. And thanks, Kim. You did a really fabulous presentation and you covered a lot of things we were going to talk about. So I'm going to be brief, I think, I hope. So thank you for inviting us to speak tonight. We really appreciate it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between food insecurity and hunger and malnutrition, which Kim already addressed. So food insecurity we know is widespread and rapidly increasing, but malnutrition is another animal. And both have really been adversely impacted by the pandemic and recently by the war in Ukraine. So Ukraine and Russia are the breadbasket of the world, and 30% of the wheat that a lot of the sub-Saharan African nations get comes directly from Ukraine. And the World Food Program purchases 50% of their wheat from Ukraine. So, you know those numbers, you can see the impact the war is having right now. And just to quote David Beasley, the head of the United Nations World Food Program, he is now taking half of the rations for a hungry child and giving that half ration to a starving child, and vice versa. You know, he's taking from one to feed the other. I said that backwards. Half from the starving to give half to the hungry. So, the things that are impacting malnutrition are war, climate change. We have the net effect of this, that people are choosing to leave their homes in order to feed their families. I mean, people don't choose to leave their home unless there's a really drastic reason. When you can't feed your children, that becomes a drastic reason, and then we have refugees and refugee issues. So I wanted to go through some definitions, and Ken, you can show the definition of stunting if that's okay. Kim already told you that it's based on a child's height and age, and it's a measure of chronic nutritional deficiency. It's the impaired growth and development that children experience from poor nutrition, repeated infections and inadequate psychosocial stimulation. And they never recover from that. And the loss in potential, the economic loss from having stunted children is an enormous problem in the world as we move forward. 22% of the world's young children are currently stunted. And that's just a hard number to get my head around. Now, wasting is a different measure. That's based on a child's weight and height, and that measures an acute nutritional deficiency. And wasting has a much greater risk of imminent death. So together, wasting and stunting are just dramatic problems. So we have the acute risk of death with wasting. Stunting is hugely negative for development and the enormous economic loss. I want to tell you that if you have time, there are a couple, at the end, I'll tell you about some videos that you can check out that really demonstrate the what stunting really looks like, that are quite powerful. So the numbers, 150 million stunted children, 22% of the world's young children, 45 million wasted, just enormous numbers. But then when you look at COVID, there are an additional 40 million children who have had wasting from between 2020 and 2030. And there'll be an additional 22 million with stunting. Child death, we really have impacted, decreased child death enormously. So now there are 283,000 more child death since COVID, but we are not impacting, we are losing ground on the amount of wasting and stunting. So one of the things we're doing is focused nutrition interventions, and we're advocating for the power of 4. And what the power of 4 does is prenatal vitamins and micronutrients, not just iron deficiency, not just your B vitamins and things like that, but all of the micronutrients that women are missing. And especially with young girls and stunted girls, I always like to say this, stunting begets stunting. If you have a stunted girl, she is going to become a stunted woman and have more difficulty. And there's this generational impact of stunting that you'll see in the future. We're also working on supporting exclusive breastfeeding for at least the first 6 months. People need support of that. There was a report that came out from the World Health Organization just yesterday, I believe, that it may have been the day before yesterday, that showed that formula manufacturers have gotten around the regulations that were established in the 1980s to prevent them from advertising. And they're advertising to women through social media. And they're really having an adverse impact on getting women to continue to breastfeed. So we have to, ramp up what we're doing to have women supported to breastfeed. Vitamin A supplements, when kids are vitamin A deficiency, they have a higher rate of death and a much higher rate of blindness. And then the fourth pillar is ready to use therapeutic foods, things like plumpy nut, which are palatable. We can travel with them easily. They're foil packs, and the kids like them. And it's an easy way to get a massive amount of nutrients and protein into malnourished kids. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ken to talk more about what we're doing in advocacy.
Thanks, Leslie. And it was really, thank you for the presentation on Yama, Malawi. Really impactful, amazing work that you're all doing, and that Together Women Rise is supporting. So really was wonderful to hear all that. And again, so the support of Together Women Rise, so important in what's going to happen to those 10,000 people in that village. So the thing is, I guess on malnutrition, is that this is not rocket science. We know what to do, but we still have a huge child malnutrition problem in the world. And I often ask myself, how can this be when we really established this as a human right back in 1948 through the Declaration of Human Rights, and reinforced once again with the Universal Declaration for the Eradication of Hunger and Malnutrition in 1974. So what's missing here? What's the problem? The problem really is political will. We know what to do exactly, the Power Four, other things that Yamba Malawi is doing to support people. We know how to do this. We just do not have the political will to get the job done. Even though we've made progress over time, we're still far from where we need to be when 22% of the world's children are experiencing stunting. So our job really needs to be to generate the political will, to hold decision makers accountable to these human rights goals and declarations. Otherwise, they're just really hollow promises that the world has made and has failed to live up to. And so we really need to focus also on what works and really bring resources to targeting what works. So we've been working on that with Together Women Rise and Results on both sort of the increased funding levels that we need to, I'm going to stop sharing for a second, increased funding levels that we need to do this. So we're advocating right now with the US government to increase global nutrition funding from 155 million in this past year to $300 million for fiscal year 2023, almost a doubling of funding, because that's really what's needed. We're also working on legislation right now that would require USAID, our aid agency, and they actually do nutrition work in Malawi. They do a whole bunch of stuff in Malawi that would bring more focus. So this legislation would bring more focus to the Big Four, establish a baseline and progress goals towards them would have to be reported back to Congress on a regular basis. And really these things would have to focus on what is effective and the effective use of our resources for global malnutrition. So where we are right now, we got 178 members of the House to support the funding level for next year, that increased funding level, so bipartisan as well, Republicans and Democrats. And then we also have been working on the legislation, which is called the Global Malnutrition Prevention and Treatment Act. That's HR 4693. That passed the full House last week with the votes of 220 Democrats and 164 Republicans. So it had passed the full House. But we're not done yet. We need to do the same thing now on the Senate side of things, both with the nutrition funding levels and a similar nutrition bill that is in the Senate side of the Capitol, which is Senate 2956. And so that's the same bill name, and again, very similar bill. And so all I would just say is, if you're interested in working on this at sort of the global scale, in addition to the scale that you're working on and affecting people's lives so directly through Together Women Rise and Yamba Malawi, join us to advocate. We are the advocacy arm of Together Women Rise and working together. And we have a meeting coming up on 5/17, the 17th of May, 8:30 p.m. We're going to be working on these issues. There's a little link down at the bottom, a tiny URL that you can use. I can paste that in the chat as well for you. But I just encourage you to check it out if you're interested in looking at making a difference through the policy and advocacy side of things with funding and policy. And that's it for me.
I'm sure Leslie and Ken would be happy to answer any questions. If you'd like to put them in the chat, that would be awesome. And yes, the next advocacy webinar, May 17th at 8:30 p.m. And there is a link in the chat for you to sign up there if you like. Signing up does not necessarily mean you have to commit forever, but certainly come out and learn more about it and find out how you can make an even greater difference that complements, a lot of what we're already doing in our chapters for women and girls and children and families around the world.
So I wanted to just point out, the advocacy portion is trying to look at a macro level and really, influence policy and move money in larger fashion so that we can sooner get to gender equity, which is obviously our long-term goal. It's not as sexy as working with little groups and being able to say, I helped feed that child, that individual child. But you know, when you build a relationship with your legislator and you get them to sign on to things that they haven't signed on to before, and you move billions of dollars, it's pretty awesome, you know, and it's very powerful in a very different way. So I think there are quite a number of you on this tonight who are in our advocacy group, and we hold your hand and help you build that relationship with your congressmen, congresswomen, your senators, and influence them, because you've hired them. Ken will always say this: you've hired them, and you want to, you want to help direct what their job is, how successful they are. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Leslie. Rachel, I'm going to turn it back over to you for our wrap up.
Well, thank you so much, of course, Kim, for being here with us, and Ken and Leslie as well. And just to echo what Leslie said, hop on the next meeting, which is happening on May 17th, that advocacy group webinar, even if you're just curious about it. And you might think to yourself, oh, I'm not the type of person who picks up the phone and makes phone calls, or I'm not that extroverted person. But you don't necessarily have to be the type of person who's comfortable banging on the phones to be the type of person who makes a difference. And I'm sure that, especially with Ken and Leslie and the rest of our very committed advocacy team, there to help and there to take you every step of the way. It's something that might be new and seem a little scary, but it's also something that has an amazing impact. So absolutely consider joining for that webinar, which will be Tuesday, May 17th at 8:30. And as always, and as I'm sure many of you, if not all of you on the webinar know, Together Women Rise really depends on your donations, our donations, to fund projects like the one that Kim taught us about tonight, as well as our education and engagement activities, like the type of advocacy work we do. And so you can go to our website, togetherwomenrise.org, to make a single donation or to set up monthly giving to support our programs month after month. I am part of the monthly automated donations because, my memory being what it is, there's just no way, and it's much more convenient for me to just know that money is coming out, it's taken care of. I'm supporting the organizations that we're working with every single month, and it's one less thing that I have to worry about checking off the list. So definitely encourage you, if you've not signed up for a recurring donation, it is a lot simpler than writing the check each month. And then we do have one other upcoming event to share, and that's going to be our book club event. And that's coming up June 8th at 12 p.m. ET. And we're going to be discussing the book, The Girl with the Louding Voice. And you'll notice 12 noon ET is not the usual book club time, but that is because we have the privilege of the author of that book, Abby Dari, joining us from her home in the UK. So it's a free and open conversation with the author that is open to everyone. Bring yourself, bring a friend, even if you haven't had a chance to read the book yet, just to come and listen to that engaging conversation. It's going to be fantastic. And again, that is June 8th at 12 noon ET. And finally, just be sure to check out our website. I'll say it one more time, togetherwomenrise.org, for all of the additional information about upcoming events. We do keep that up to date, and you can also click on the Join Us tab to learn more about how to become more involved with Together Women Rise. Perhaps if these monthly webinars are your main focus and you are interested in the book club, or you're interested in the advocacy group, or just finding other in-person chapters near you, the Join Us tab would be the place to do that on our website. And I think that is about all we have for you. So for everyone who joined us, thank you so much. Have a lovely afternoon if you're coming in from the West Coast, or evening if you're Central and East Coast. And we will look forward to seeing you all at our next event. Goodbye, everybody.